nature nut. I'm not afraid to admit I'm wild about the wild things and I'm proud of it. I'm just a simple case, open and shut. No doubt about it, I'm a nature nut. Today we'll go bird watching, tomorrow we'll catch toads. The next day we'll take photographs of bugs along the road. I never get the feeling that I'm in a rut. That's why I'm a nature nut. Well, I'm a nature nut, I'm not afraid to admit I'm wild about the wild things and I'm proud of it. I'm just a simple case, open and shut. No doubt about it, I'm a nature nut.
Well, hi there. Or should I say hello there? Ha! We're going to talk about high and low today, high and low tide. Hey, don't get me wrong, this is going to be cool. We're going to explore the world of nature's self-cleaning aquariums, tide pools. It's a neat thing. And in order to do that, we've come here to Botanical Bay in the beautiful, spectacular province of British Columbia, Canada. Okay, now before we get into the world of tide pool critters, we'd better review the basics of tides. The tides, it's a gravitational phenomenon. It has to do with the pull of the sun's gravity and the moon's gravity on the waters of the ocean. And when they pull one way, the water comes up, that's called high tide. When they pull the other way, water go down, that's called low tide. And it happens, well, it takes about 6 hours to go from high tide to low tide, another 6 hours to come back. So you get 2 up and downs per day, and that's tide. Okay, let's go look at some tide pool critters now. Tides and waves are two different things, and high tides do not always mean high waves. Now, tide pools, they form in rocky places, and in the language of marine biology, we call this the rocky intertidal, the rocky zone between the high tides and the low tides. And you know, the cool thing about tide pool critters is that they're here on purpose. They like it in tide pools. They're not just stranded here by accident and, you know, prefer to be out in the open sea. The tide pools, they're full of food, they're warm, they're clear, there's no big waves crashing on you all the time. At least, you know, not at the low tide, and so they prefer to live in tide pools. There are the occasional times when you do find sea creatures that would rather not be in the tide pool, stranded in the tide pool, at which point the tide pool is too warm and you know, full of new kinds of predators that they're not used to. But for the most part, the critters you see in the tide pools, they want to be in the tide pools. And the great thing is, every 12 hours they get washed out. They're nature's self-cleaning aquariums. Okay, try not to step on anything that's alive here. When you look in the tide pools, the main things you see are, of course, the plants. Lots of nice plants, grassy-looking plants, different kinds of algae, many different shades of the color green. They're beautiful, but today we're just going to ignore them because we're interested in the critters. And a lot of these critters, they're pretty easy to confuse with plants, I must admit. Sea anemones, sea urchins, things like that. But let's start with an easy one. There we go, a starfish. Now, I gotta tell you, biologists these days, they don't call them starfish anymore because they're not fish. They call them sea stars, even though they're not stars. Now this one here, it's a nice sort of orangey looking one. That's the ochre sea star. There's also a purple one in the deeper in the pool there. These are scientifically known as pisaster, and they're very common West Coast sea stars. Well, I remember when I was a kid, you know, you'd come out to the coast and everybody would just be plucking these things off the rocks and taking them home. I don't know what they did with them, dry them, sell them to seafood restaurants to decorate the wall. They're terrible. Here, I brought one to show you. Look, that's what I call the Pisaster disaster. And you know, whenever I look at these wonderful marine critters, I think back to the classes that I took in marine biology and my dear old professor, Dr. Chaw.
A sea star and sea urchin, both a echinoderm. A echinoderm, very interesting, a marine creature, move along the bottom of the ocean, look about using teeny tiny tube feet. Teeny tiny tube feet on bottom of our body, stretch out, grab ocean bottom in a cool animal across the ocean. It's very, very interesting. Both sort of animal, five-fold radial symmetry, 5-arm. You kind of see the same pattern on the circular back of an urchin. For the sea anemone, it's a different sort of creature entirely. It's more of a cylindrite, like a upside-down jellyfish attached by bottom of a body. Although really, no bottom, no top body, all in just one big blob. No, not a echinoderm, a cylindrite. I confused myself.
Ah, those were the good old days. And you know, he didn't even seem to mind when we would imitate his accent. He found it flattering rather than insulting, or I wouldn't do it right now, believe me. Anyway, oh, that was great. Yeah. Students had difficulty though. They really couldn't understand the word shrimp. Shrimp. Shrimp is a type of a crustacean. You and I would spell it S-H-R-I-M-P. Shrimp.
Shrimp are not common in tide pools, and most of the things people call tide pool shrimp are really scuds.
Let's sit down for a moment here. Nice to take a break from all that tide pooling while the tide is high. You know, I'm getting all nostalgic being here. Nostalgic about the times when I was a kid and our family, we'd go to the coast to Vancouver to visit Aunt Hazel. Aunt Hazel. Hazel Acorn. Can you believe that? My grandparents were not thinking clearly when they named poor old Aunt Hazel. Anyway, the funnest thing that I remember when we would visit Aunt Hazel was going down to the sea and looking for crabs. I loved crabs because crabs are kind of like sea bugs, and you know how I feel about bugs. Of course, I've matured somewhat since those days, and now I see crabs in an entirely different light, like most of you, I'm sure. Thank you so much. Lovely. Good, good, good. Now let's do that popular biologist game, make your dinner into a lab dissection. Let's review the anatomy of crabs. Now, crabs technically are decapod crustaceans. Decapod means 10 legs, and they do have 10 legs. Of course, the first legs, the front legs, have the big claws on them, and they're bigger because they need more muscles inside to operate those claws. The other legs end in points, and they're used to walk around, of course, and they walk kind of sideways, which is a characteristic feature of crabs. Crabs have wonderful mouths with many complicated mouth parts. And I'm not going to tell you what all those mouth parts are, but look at them all. There's little fingers and grabbers and brushes and brooms and shovels and every kind of pliers, every kind of thing you can imagine is hidden in that crab mouth there. If we turn him down here, he's got two little antennae, he or she, I don't know. And the eyes. I love the eyes of crabs because they're on stalks. And if the crab gets nervous, he can just tuck his entire eye into that little divot in the shell, the carapace that covers the back. So there you go. Those are the basic features of your average crab. There are lots of crabs around here in the tide pools, but you know, not the kind that you'd ever want to eat, even if you were allowed to eat them. They're way too tiny. You'd have to be really good with those little shell crunchers to get any meat out of them. So you might as well just satisfy yourself with a little bit of crab watching Very enjoyable things to watch. I especially like the hermit crabs. Now, hermit crabs have the same general body plan, but their tail section does extend a little bit so they can hook it into snail shells. They don't have their own shell, they use the shell of a snail. Of course, I have no idea why they call them hermit crabs. It seems every time you see them, they're together with some other hermit crab. You'd think they'd be loners. They should call them social crabs, or crabs who like to hang out in groups. Not hermit crabs. Another dumb animal name.
Crabs live in almost all wet environments, from the bottom of the ocean to streams high in tropical mountains.
Well, you see all these little white shells here? These are the shells of barnacles, and they are waiting very patiently for the high tide to return. We're right up at the upper limit of barnacles in the intertidal, the high barnacle line. At least that's what I call it. Now, barnacles, I don't know exactly what to tell you about barnacles, because look at them. I mean, they're just sitting there. They don't do a lot of stuff. While you're looking at these barnacles, though, maybe you should think about this question. What do you think would happen on this planet if evolution started going backwards? Would dinosaurs roam the Earth? Would we have cockroaches the size of dinner plates? But you know, you think about barnacles, and they're really kind of neat, because the ancestor of a barnacle was a regular kind of a crustacean, and it probably had eyes and a head and legs and stuff like that. It was able to move around and do exciting things, fulfill its dreams. And now look at them. They don't go anywhere. They don't have any head to speak of. It's just a body, mostly mouth. Every once in a while, those plates in the center of the shell there will open up when the barnacle's underwater, and this fan-like mouth comes out and sort of grabs things out of the water, filters small things out of the water to eat. And, you know, apart from that, hey, it's got a digestive system, maybe a couple of reproductive organs, and that's that. That's all there is to it. In a sense, barnacles are evolving backward from the complex to the simple. I guess in some sense, many of us are evolving backwards, if that's all it takes. Sit in one place, focus on your digestive system. It's not a bad idea. Perhaps there's hope for this world after all. Now, on your way to the tide pool, remember to step only on the bare rock. You don't want to commit mass murder here, and even these barnacles can't take too much stomping. We have to be respectful of the tide pool critters. Now, let me give you a few pool peering pointers here. Basically, it's an easy thing to do because the water in most tide pools is beautifully crystal clear. So you just walk up to the pool and you look in and see what's there. Well, there's a cool one right down there. See under the lip there, that little orange guy? That is a sea slug, a nudibranch. They're beautiful, beautiful things. That's the first wild nudibranch I think I've ever seen. So, great moment. But there are a few things you can do to improve the quality of your tide pool viewing. One of them is to use polarized sunglasses. And if you don't know the benefits of this, get yourself a pair of polarized sunglasses. Just turn them like this and you can see how, at certain angles, they reduce the reflection of the sky off the water. Ah, there we go. The colors are more vibrant. You can see deeper into the pool, and it really improves your general pool peering experience. What a cool pool this pool is. Wow.
Seals generally don't care about tide pools, but some seals like to bask in the sun on pool-filled rocks.
Well, you're probably wondering why I haven't mentioned these little fishes yet. The reason is they're too obvious. I wanted you to look at the other things first. These fishes, well, all the ones I've seen have been little tide pool sculpins. And they really like tide pools. Now, they're called sculpins because they're always sculping around on the bottom, if you know what I mean.
They live on the bottom of the pools, but they're not bottom feeders in the sense that they don't have a downward directed sucking mouth like a sucker or something like that. They're just sort of scooting along the bottom using their pectoral fins, not just to swim, but also to just sort of push themselves along on the ground. So they're kind of interesting fish. You gotta like them. Very camouflaged. If they get in a place where they're, you know, with a rock as a background or something, they can be almost impossible to see until they move. And I believe they can change color to a certain extent too. You see really light ones in light colored pools, and you see really dark ones in dark pools, and they must be able to change from time to time. Now, I gotta tell you though, the urge here is very strong to dramatize the plight of these little fishes. You know what I mean? They forage higher and higher as the tide rises, and they find themselves trapped in a tide pool. The tide is going away, the sun is beating down, the pool is getting warmer and warmer, the amount of oxygen is decreasing, the fish is under extreme stress. Can it live until the next high tide? The tide comes back up 12 hours and 23 minutes later, but it doesn't quite get up as high as it did the last time, and the fish are doomed, and there comes the great blue heron, and it's gonna eat him, and oh, it's so sad. We could have done that, but we're not going to. I ran into an ichthyologist the other day, Ron Coleman, and Ron told me that's always the way fish are portrayed on television. They're always the pitiful things that dry up in their own pools. So, for you, Ron, just gonna show these happy, healthy sculpins. Don't worry, folks, they'll be okay. Sleep well tonight. Tide's coming up, right there. Be here in a few minutes. No problem. They got it licked. This is what they like to do. Natural environment. No herons for miles.
Tide comes in, tide goes out. It's tide pool thing, that's what I'm talking about. Tide pool. In come the waves, out go the crud. Keep things clean with a real flush flood. Little fish up, big fish down. It's the intertidal ambience that makes this town. Tide pool. In like a lion and out like a mouse. You never know who'll be staying at that boarding house. Oh, root-tooty, doot-doot-doot-doot, doot-doot-dooty, root-doot-dooty-dooty, tide pool.
Bye. Have a nice weekend.
So of course you know that not all the creatures that frequent tide pools are marine creatures. I mean, after all, we're doing a show about how interesting it is for people to visit tide pools, and we're not the only ones. Birds. Birds are big in the rocky intertidal. It's a great place for bird watching. There are lots and lots of birds. There's northwestern crows all around us. There's the Steller's jays hanging out on the driftwood behind me. Both beautiful, familiar members of the corvid family, but nifty birds down by the water as well. There is a yellowlegs over there, a beautiful yellow-legged shorebird. That is a greater yellowlegs. One of the most beautiful ducks in the world, harlequin ducks. Harlequin ducks, during the breeding season, they go up into the mountains and they hang out in very fast-flowing streams. They're really good at white water, but outside the breeding season, like right now, they hang out down by the shore on the rocky, intertidal kind of places. It's a beautiful thing. Bald eagle. Bald eagles everywhere up and down the coast here. They're like sparrows. It's beautiful. Majestic creatures. You gotta like them. But for sheer majesty, in my opinion, you can't beat the gulls. Gulls like glaucous wing gulls. Beautiful things. Beautiful. Boy, that's the kind of thing makes life worth living. For many birds, catching food in a tide pool is like shooting fish in a barrel, as if anyone ever does that. Well, the tide is coming back up, so I'm just gonna hang out here until it chases me onto the shore, and then it will be time to go. So I hope we'll see you again soon. I hope you've enjoyed your little tour of the tide pool world. And Professor Cha, if you're out there, I'm a nature nut, and a hooper you are too. Teeny tiny tuba feet, that's what I remember. Or was it trombone feet? Clarinet feet? Bassoon feet? Nope, it was definitely tinny tiny tuba feet.
Same time each and every week, uncensored and uncut. No doubt about it, I'm a nature nut.